Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I want to do a little discussion talking about Maliss. I'm going to show you this preemptive build for the deck. Obviously, this is super early testing. I haven't even seen too much results for this deck in the OCG just yet, but I know that's going to roll in the next couple weeks and months prior to us actually getting the set where this comes out in. But it's a really exciting deck. It's probably, in my estimation, I think maybe the strongest point on this deck is, competitively at least, is that I think it's the most competent shifter deck we've ever seen. And what I mean by that is, like, in a lot of cases, just like being able to work under shifter generally means a strategy like it's already devoid of like an entire factor of the game, and that's like having stuff sent to grave and having graveyard effects, right? If you want to play shifter. And so that takes away like maybe the second biggest facet in the game in terms of where monsters are their most valuable, or just archetypes in general, because obviously field is first, and then you could argue between hand and grave, those are the next two, and in a lot of cases grave even more so. So in a lot of cases, engines are just not that strong when they're the type of decks that can play shifter. I think about stuff like Flu and Kashtira. They are pretty one-note, very linear type decks. This deck can be a little bit linear. It still is that Cybers kind of link-up type strategy, but I think it has a little more versatility in the way it's going to be allowed to play. So I'm kind of excited for this one. I think it's a really cool strategy, and plus the place we are right now in the format with seeing the new ban list and kind of knowing kind of the situation we're in, which is we're in a slightly better position than we were last week, but you know, very soon it feels like we're kind of going to be in a similar position that we've been in, or at least like we'll continue with like kind of in a similar position. And so a lot of people are looking forward to new products to hopefully mix things up rather than the next ban list. So that's the other thing where like Maliss and like Rizio can kind of come in hard and hopefully put a stamp on the game. They don't have to be the new best deck in the game, but like a new solid deck that definitely shakes things up and changes the dynamic, especially when you add in another really competent shifter strategy. So yeah, here's my list here. Let's run through it real quick, starting off with the main deck. Of course, we start with 3 White Rabbit and 3 Dormouse. These are basically one card plays on their own, which is really nice. Then you have 2 copies of Cheshire Cat. You have to play her just because she's a name, because you go through like banishes, like banishing from deck sometimes pretty early on, and you just need that third name, even though this is by far the worst one so far. Although, to be fair, if we get one more wave of support that has 1 or even down the line 2 more main deck like Maliss monsters that have the same like stipulation where if they're banished they summon back, and then like also like a decent effect other than that, like if they're just 2 more decent names that you want to play, Cheshire Cat becomes so much better. So does like stuff like Allure of Darkness, which I should have put in the side deck as an option, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So yeah, 2 of her still, but she could be a 3 of if we get 1 or 2 more names, and we're actually drawing her with enough Maliss cards consistently enough. But with the first wave, it feels like just these 3 isn't enough to like max out on Cheshire Cat. From there, you have 1 Sigma and 1 Dotscaper. These are just good generic Cyburst bodies you can use as extenders and combo pieces at times. 3 copies of Paraloxy. This is just one of the best generic just Cyburst extender cards, where it's just open it and it's going to help you play through quite a bit. It's going to help you chain block certain things. It's really quite good. Then you move to the spells, 3 copies of Malice in Underground. I almost wanted to mess around with the terraforming here. The awkward part about this card, and this is why I also want to see another spell for the archetype, is the archetype already has a link 3 that basically on summon just like gets you a spell from the archetype straight from the deck. The problem is there's only 1, so if you open Malice in Underground, then Red Ransom's utility is almost entirely diminished. Like it gets you follow-up for the next turn, but you've already used it and it's a hard once per turn, so it's really not doing much for you anymore that turn. So still a good card because it can help you extend through interaction and stuff like that. So it is like, it's a weird card where it's like, it's kind of a starter, it's kind of an extender, which is a good thing, but you also get it for free via your combo. So it's like, do we really want to open this as often as possible? You know, and that's where I went back and forth on it. But you could definitely consider terraforming. It's a small change, but it, like, you know, consistency, extendability could still be worth it. 3 copies of Signet Mining, 1 Cold Sarcophagus, 1 Foolish Burial, and 1 Called by the Grave. A couple of this is just basic, right? Signet Mining. We're on a cyber stack. You got to play this card. Then you have the 3 one-ofs that are at 1 on the ban list. Called just nice, just generic stuff. Like, this is a Cybers deck, but it is still a shifter deck overall, and like, while I do think its engine is better than most other shifter decks, its engine is still not, to me, on the same level as like some of the top decks in the game. So I still like having stuff like Called to kind of help us handle one hand trap before we can maybe... Our engine can definitely beat one hand trap fairly well. It's when you get to the second and third that you have to start worrying. So Called is solid there. Gold Sark and Foolish Burial, just solid, right? Foolish Burial can send either Sigma or Dotscaper, or in the event where you know you already have access to like a Magnamut or a Bestial in general, or something like that, you can just go ahead and send one of your Maliss girls, and this is basically like getting your engine started without your normal summon and getting like an extra Bestial, body on field too. So good utility in Burial for sure. Moving on to the traps here, we have 2 copies of Maliss TB11, 1 copy of Maliss GWC06, and 1 MTP07. To me, this is the ratio I saw the most of. Honestly, maybe I need more testing and it's just early on, but this seemed to be the ratio I liked the most. TB11 is definitely the best of the 3, just summoning straight out of deck, whereas one of them adds and the other one gets one, kind of recovers a monster. But they're all good in their own right, especially because they can be activated the turn they're set by banishing a Maliss. These cards come so clutch when you're trying to play into like targeting either removal or negation. That way you can like chain cards like these and tag out one of the girls that's already on field to dodge something that's already trying to negate them. It's really, really insane. Plus, with cards like Imperm and stuff in your deck too, or Called, you could, well, I guess you probably wouldn't use Called, but like Imperm, you could just set an Imperm, bluffing the fact that you have a way to beat like an Imperm or a Veiler. And you would just set Imperm and you don't have anything. But they already know, like, they have to play like you have one of the traps, and that you just beat it for free. And that could be really, really cheeky. Speaking of which, you end up with 14 non-engine slots in this build here, for the most part, other than, like, Called, I guess. So 15, you could call it. I like this. I think the only thing really worth note is obviously Shifter. This, to me, I might make a full-on video. I think the single most impactful card you can play in Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of like a single card that elevates your ability to win duels and convert like into more wins is Shifter. And I think it's partially because only 10% of the decks or whatever that are considered competitive strategies can even afford to play the card. So that's the one thing, and that basically means 90% of the game can't and won't, because it just crushes them. And so to me, like, a deck being able to play this card is just such a huge swing. We'll talk about some options down below too, where like some alternatives if you don't want to play Shifter, or potentially down the line if Shifter gets hit. Definitely some cool stuff there. And then Bestials. Bestials you could also potentially go even harder in, because they just kind of become extenders. They become really good extenders in hand, especially if you get stagnant and your opponent actually cuts you off from your engine. If you just have any of your girls in the graveyard, like, just having a Bestial in hand is actually like insanely good on follow-up turns, and even on the opponent's turn to actually get some of your value going, and even set up extra interruptions on your opponent's turn. Like, imagine getting nibbed but having a Bestial in hand and being able to, like, on your opponent's turn, like, Bestial, like, banish White Rabbit, then White Rabbit summons back and sets one of the traps, and, like, you end up getting, like, interaction out of it. I guess you couldn't do that, but, like, if you had already gone through one of the Link 3s, maybe that's a better scenario, where you would already be going through, like, one of the Link 3s, and basically banishing it, reborning it, getting its bonus effect, and then some, right? Like, these cards can be really nasty. I'm actually quite on the fence of like just playing more of these. Like Foolish was like kind of a last second include. Like, you could easily make room for like 5 or 6 Bestials overall for sure, and I would not blame you for it. All right, cool. But that is basically the rest of the all the other hand traps here are pretty basic stuff here. You don't really need to spend too much time there. Looking at the extra deck though, a lot of this is going to be the same from what you see, but I do find that I'm like one spot shy, and we'll get to that in the side deck here, because it's really tight. So as a Link deck, right? Link Decoder and Link Griot, these are Link ones. You just need these. Sometimes you're going to normal summon White Rabbit. She's going to get impermed or whatever, and your only extender is like a Bestial. So you just need to be able to clear her off the field, so that way you can banish her with a Bestial and just like keep your plays going. So these guys just matter for that. Plus, Decoder is really good because I believe 2 of their separate Link 3s have 2300 attack and are Cybers. So even using him to make those, this card reborns itself for just extra free material. Really good. Link Griot also allowing the deck to play into trap strategies with like just extra little oomph, really nice. Splash Mage, this is basic. This is cookie cutter, just Cyber stuff. You play a Cyber's Link deck, this guy's probably in the deck. Cyber's Wicked, this card's a funny card. This card basically allows you to just search Mathmix Sigma for just extra free material later on. I've seen versions of the deck that play this card. I've seen versions of the deck that also don't play this card. So I could see a world where we end up cutting this card if we want to lean away from Sigma and just play more Bestials and stuff. I could see a world where that's possible, but it is pretty free. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's that. You know, so I'll have to just keep an eye on it. Honestly, I need to do more testing and see if, like, how crucial this card actually is. Next up, 1 SP. The Malice cards only really lock you into Link monsters. It's stuff like Splash Mage and Transcode Talker that lock you into Cyber. So as long as you haven't gone into those, the utility of Little Knight is still really reachable in this deck. I still would probably prefer to play it. And then you get to the 3s, obviously 1 Red Ransom, 1 White Binder, and 1 Hearts of Cryptor. This is a deck that wants to be banished, so you don't really care about playing any more than one of these. The only thing you're scared about is something like a Kashtira matchup where they're potentially able to like unicorn one of these or unicorn or Fenrir one of these away, and because they banish face down, so then they'd basically be gone for the duel. But other than that, these cards are phenomenal. Read over each one of these; they all are crazy. Honestly, all 3 of them, they're really, really good. Transcode. This card's also just solid. I could see a world where like the goal is like never make Transcode turn 1 and just save him in the extra deck, because like that means the next turn you could either reborn any of these if they're engraved and you don't have a way to banish them, or something like your Splash Mage and then Splash Mage revives something else, and now you turned 3 Link materials into 6 like that, basically for free entirely. Really cool. I definitely think this card is strong enough. Protect Code. This is just another free Link material card. As if you're going Wombo combo, that's my thing with this card, is like this card is more of a card where like this card is not really that crucial, except for when you are trying to make like your biggest best boards. If your opponent is gonna let you off scot-free and, you know, go through with your whole board, this guy is the guy who's supposed to be like really good there, but he's not always coming up in the duels where you're trading hand traps, you're playing more the mid-range game. So that's why I'm like, I like him because he raises the ceiling, but he doesn't always come up. So we'll see. Same thing with Firewall. Firewall's just part of the mass M board, not like duel to duel, but still, when you do go crazy, like you do want to have like the full payoff. So that's why I have him in there for now. Access Code, that's just a staple. I don't really need to cover him. He's going to be 5,300. He's going to be able to pop like 3 to 4 cards. Also consider the fact that he can't just banish any of the Malice Link 3s for his effects. So imagine using one of them as material for him to then banish one of them to pop a card, and then they come back, and then you just already have OTK. It's crazy. And the last card, and like the real biggest boss monster of the deck, is your Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid Neo Tempest Terahertz. This card's really cool. I really like this card, man. There are times where like if you just get like interrupted or like hand trapped once or twice, but you really had gas, you can still get to this card. And then you just send your D-Save Worm on your turn, then you save the Aggregator, and then this card basically by itself is a walking Imperm plus a Spell and Trap Negate. So just all in one card is pretty strong there, plus whatever else you were able to end on. It's really good. He doesn't do everything on his own, but being able to end on him, also with like Firewall co-linked, you know, also with something like Hearts of Cryptor Live to quick banish something, and maybe the ability to like get some traps in rotation on the opponent's turn, get an extra banish there. There's quite a bit you can do, and with 14, 15 hand trap slots in the deck as well, the sky is really the limit here. So yeah, that runs through the extra deck. And then talking about the side deck stuff, Bestials, like I said, so not only could you try and play more of just like the straight hand trap Bestials, more Druid's Worms, more Baldrakes, whatever, there's a legitimate thing to be said about, is there a world where we mess around with just a legit full Bestial engine with Lubellion, with some of the other cards? The only thing there is like you start playing more and more into like your own shifter. So like depending on some of these other engines, like yes, do they raise the ceiling? Yes, do they raise the ability to like extend further and get further in a lot of your combos? They can, but they also don't appreciate shifter on their own end. So you end up in a weird position of like shifter being what I call the single card that like gives you the biggest advantage over any other deck in the game for the most part, or I guess like the whole of the rest of the competitive scene. Do you cut that to play a better side engine? Now, maybe the answer is you either have to have a personal vendetta where you say, I'm not going to play Shifter, or two, after a format, after two, and Maliss has been good, and maybe like a little bit too good, Konami says, we're going to put Shifter to one. We're going to ban Shifter. That's a world where then the pivot is, okay, they took out our our super easy degenerate win con. Now we pivot to the Bestial Maliss deck, where we play like a huge Bestial engine with 3 Lubellion, Magnamut, Druism Baldrake, probably Saronir as well, right? You end up going into Regain consistently because you just want those free draws, all that stuff. And that could be a pretty cool addition to the deck and way to pivot into a different form of the strategy. Next up would be Mathmech. This is only a scenario where Mathmech Circular gets unbanned. I mean, I don't think anybody really even thought Mathmech was that big of a problem when Circular was at 1. Konami pushed it even further and banned him. If they put him back at 1, I mean, look we already play Signet Mining. Like, this just becomes, and we already play Sigma, right? Like, this just becomes an extra superior extender on probably even on a higher level than Parallel Exceed is, that we're able to take advantage of. And so that's just something to mention. And then lastly, for the main deck stuff is like the mini coders. The problem with the mini coders is definitely extra X space. Extra X space is already super tight. There's already a card that I don't have in the extra deck right now that I really want to get in there. And playing these cards can only be used as material from hand to make a Code Talker. Well, that's the end of the sentence. But that means you have to have a link to Code Talker, which we already don't have. And then other than that, we only have transcode and access code. So do you also have to include like an extra link 3 to be able to make like full worth of that engine? It's a nuanced discussion for sure. But again, these are also cards that trigger Engrave. So these guys conflict quite a bit with Shifter yet again. So you just have to be weary of that for sure. And but these are definitely interesting options in the future as well, especially if Shifter gets banned, like we were talking about. And then a couple other options. I saw some combo versions of the deck that also played Code Talker inverted, where they would like search out a different Cybers monster, or are they searching one of the, like if you've already normal summoned one of these two, you'd be able to like search out, or maybe it was Cheshire. I can't remember which one. Then you search it out, and then you just summon it with inverted. So it just pulls them out of the hand, lets you keep going. I don't know how crucial it is. It doesn't seem like an absolutely crucial card, but it's there. G-Golem Crystal Horde, to me, is the card I wanted to play. I just feel like on follow-up turns, if your board ever is broken, when you play one Splash Mage, when you play one Transcode, and you are kind of forced to go through both on turn 1, and your board is still broken after that, maybe you get nipped, whatever, G-Golem is like the best like just follow-up card to have in the deck, because it just means any 2 Cyberses from that point on goes into Crystal Heart. Crystal Heart reborns Transcode. Basically, we talked about earlier how Transcode is basically a link 6 worth of material if you already have Splash Engrave on a follow-up turn, except you're doing it with a link 2. So you're going, by making 2 link materials, you're going to get 5 with Transcode, you're going to get 7 with Splash Mage, and you're going to get an 8th with whatever Splash Mage reborn. So that to me is a card that I really wanted to consider if our boards ever were broken, because theoretically if our board is broken like that, we would have Transcode Engrave at least, because he's the Earth we need to reborn off of this. But that's definitely something else to consider. But I really wanted to make room for this. I just didn't know what to cut here. I talked about how Protect Code and Firewall, because they make your board stronger. Is Wicked absolutely necessary? I don't know, needs more testing, but I really want to make room for this card. This, to me, is the card I really want to slide in. And then Zeraboros also really interesting, just being able to because the deck can summon on the opponent's turn relatively easily, like being able to just summon a Maliss monster, then Zeraboros wipes the board, interrupts your opponent probably immensely, and then you just also recoup any Maliss monsters that were banished there, which is probably 2 at least, and then on summon, most of those get you a card. Like, it can really help you snowball and also like run your opponent out of the game all at one time, which is really cool. I don't know if it's totally worth it. It seems like the deck has better, more consistent like ways to have good end boards, but it is still a powerful card and with synergy here for sure. The last card we didn't mention is Allure of Darkness. A lot of people were high on this card really early on. Kind of similar discussion with Cheshire Cat, where like how I don't want to play 3 Cheshire yet. If one more good Maliss main deck name, like guaranteed 3 of type Maliss name comes out, and then you're telling me we could play 4 3 ofs at 12. You could also play Cyanet Mining, right, at the same time. We're talking 15 cards. That to me is probably enough for Allure, especially if we're already playing Bestials, we're already playing Shifter, where they don't have synergy with Allure, but like it keeps you from like losing the game by losing your whole hand to Allure. So you're talking 21 cards with this type of build with a couple more names, and Allure could be really good. So I could see a world where it's really good. For me, it's just not enough yet. Same idea as Cheshire Cat. One more good playable 3 of in the main deck, and I think it's there though. So I would definitely have that as an option to keep an eye on for sure. In fact, let's go ahead and throw that down here while we're talking about it. But yeah, I think this deck's really exciting. I'm really excited to see how it goes and what it can do. Where I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on the OCG for this one to see where this deck sits, because it's still hard to get a great grasp on truly how powerful and how well this deck stands up to other decks in the format, and also just certain tech choices and directions a lot of those players choose to go in, whether they lean more into Bestials, whether they, play some of the Code Talker stuff. If some of them choose to even cut a Shifter from the main and actually just play more extenders, more engines, stuff like that, I'm definitely curious to see where they go. But yeah, there you go. There's my in-depth early Maliss deck profile and discussion on where they are at here. Let me know your thoughts down below on any of that stuff. I'd love to hear it, and I'll keep you guys, more content probably on Maliss at some point down the line here, especially when I learn more and maybe mess around with some combos and stuff. We'll definitely keep you updated there. But I'm out of here for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.